So I'm having a chat with Joel of For King and Country. How are you?
Oh, top of the morning. The real question is, how are you? Because this is Friday. You're just cranking
It's a
today
busy
on all
day.
the music.
It's
Yeah.
it's nice to have a little break and talk to people like yourself. And we normally start off on interview talking about music, but we're going to start off and talk about a film of yours. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jim is the definition of close to home. It's a 90s film about a mum and music and miracles and her packing 16 suitcases with six kids, 6 months pregnant, and with a financially disgraced husband and moving continents, moving from Australia to the United States to Nashville, Tennessee, speaking of music, the music capital of the world in some ways, and then losing the job once they arrived, and sort of all the perils and pitfalls and tragedies and triumphs that they faced along the way. It's ultimately our parents'
Mm.
story. So it's a 90s film. And it's sort of laced with all these 90s, needle drops and Lenny Kravitz and Jesus Jones and Rod Stewart and so on, and Seal. Um, and we started developing in 2020. It was released through Lionsgate in the United States a little over a month ago, and it was the number two movie in America, Jim,
Wow.
which is pretty outrageous when it released. Just released it in Australia, so we did a bit of a homecoming tour down, a part of a band. So we did the homecoming tour down there, and now we're here releasing it as of today in your on your great island,
Mm.
and we couldn't be happier about it. I play my dad. I should warn you, I play my dad in the film. I co-directed it and co-wrote it, and so it's again, it's the definition of a passion project
Mm.
for us.
Nice. And tell us a bit about the music that's in the film as well.
Well, man, are you a child of the 90s?
I am, yes, yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, what a cool era, you know, Nirvana and you
Hmm.
know, and you've just got this list from boy bands to, I mentioned Lenny Kravitz and so on. And so we had a real field day with taking these songs that were so nostalgic for us and sort of lacing them into the picture. So Jesus Jones and Lenny Kravitz and Rod Stewart and Seal and so on, and Michael W. Smith. And then we sort of Luke and I looked at each other because, like I mentioned, we're part of a musical group called For King and Country. Speaking of, God Save the King, and the British mantra. And we sort of said, well, we're musicians and we're making a movie that's sort of built around music. We should just do something sort of fun and novel and put together a soundtrack with all of our friends. So we invited a bunch of hip hop artists, the Cray, or country artists with Lee Brice and Hillary Scott from Lady A, um, uh, indie artists like Sleeping at Last, who lives here now, by the way. And we sort of threw them all these 90s songs onto this inspired by soundtrack and just really had a fun time crossing all of these genres and artists with each other. And yeah, proud to present that to you as well. So it's all you can handle, man, today, evidently. It's all dropping here today.
Yeah, nice. And what was it like putting your own versions to music that's already out there, already loved? What's it like putting your own take on it?
Man, I mean, being a fellow music lover and creator, it was actually kind of liberating because it was complicated, don't get me wrong. We did a cover of a Michael W. Smith song that was really big, particularly in the States in the early 90s, called Place in This World. And man, the writing on these songs is very complex. Um, but it was sort of an epiphany because you get stuck into your lane musically, this is what we do, this is not what we do. And yet you find when you break out of your lane, there's such um there's such epiphany to be had. I mean, I think of your very own Coldplay. You got Chris Martin that writes Paradise for Rihanna, and then he goes, hang on, I should just hang on to this song. Or you've just seen it with Billie Eilish and writing for Barbie. It's like, what an incredible moment. Or there's so many. You saw it with Post Malone and Sunflower. Like, he writes something for a soundtrack for another purpose, and then it becomes one of the most defining. Or or Ed Sheeran, when he writes this song for another artist, and it becomes the biggest song of the year and of his career. And so there was this that same type of epiphany. We were like, oh, this is great. We should just do soundtracks
Mm.
all the time. You know?
Yeah, yeah, but I'm sure you're going to move on to studio albums once again. It's been a couple of years since your last proper
Yeah.
record. Have you started working on new music again?
Yeah, I can't speak too much about it, but you've heard it here first. We are working on, speaking of marrying music and movies, we are working on a pretty theatrical Christmas film
Hmm.
slash musical. And we've written most all the music for it. And so I was in Trafalgar Square this morning with our producer who worked on Unsung and looking at future films together, and his wife, and sort of digesting the preposterous idea. So we'll do another interview when we announce that.
Yeah,
But yes,
we'll get you on
more
the
to come.
Christmas show as well then as well.
I love that. Let's do it.
Yeah, nice. And you've got a busy year as well because you've got a load of touring coming up as well. I bet you can't wait to be back on the road as well.
Yeah, man, we just had speaking of brain breakers, we just had a homecoming tour in Australia and New Zealand. And we had this moment. I mentioned the film follows our parents, and the inciting incident of Unsung Hero, the movie, is that our dad was a concert promoter in Australia, so he would bring bands and artists over to the Sydney Opera House and so on to play these shows. But you would know this, that the promoter is liable if no one shows up. And so
Yeah.
dad ended up on a specific tour, and an Amy Grant tour, actually losing $500,000. And so then we go back down and we play this homecoming tour. Our parents are still alive. We find ourselves in Brisbane at the entertainment center. This is last like 2 weeks ago. And dad, we're right before the show. Dad gets up and he says, hey, the last show of that tour that I lost everything was in this exact room. Here we are with the better part of 10,000 people in a packed house playing the same. So I just wept on stage. I thought, what this closed loop, this full circle moment of, and the film had just released in Australia theatrically as well. It was like the #7 film in Australia. And so you've got there's this film talking about this inciting incident in the 90s, and then we're back playing this show as a family 30 years on. And so it was kind of magical. And yeah, as you mentioned, we're going to do a couple of Christmas residencies in the States. We'll do one in Nashville, the Grand Ole Opry, and a couple in New York and LA. And then we're doing, as you would imagine, with the film release and success, we're doing for King Country Live, the Unsung Hero tour, which will be an arena, like we play all the NBA arenas in America. So it'll be sort of this boisterous, recap on For King Country to date, as well as highlighting the film as well.
Nice. When are you planning on coming back over here and doing some shows?
Well, speaking of Trafalgar Square this morning, I literally sat in Trafalgar Square, sort of again with our producing partner, and I talked to our manager who just stepped out yesterday. And I said, wouldn't it be great to do sort of a world tour? We've never done this before. And again, this is heard it here first because we don't have plans yet, but the idea is there. Like, how cool would it be to go to Canada and the States and Brazil and to London and to Amsterdam and to South Africa and to Sydney and to Brisbane and Australia and New Zealand, and just hit all of these pockets of the planet on our kind of first ever world tour. So we have to come back. I'm embarrassed that I'm here for 5 days, Jim, and we're not playing a show. Like, I feel very sort of awkward about it. I feel like I don't know what to do with my hands, But the short answer is we'll be back, and you're invited and most welcome to join when we do. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun night.
Yeah, would love to. Would love to indeed. I'd like to talk a little bit about writing as well. So, when it comes to writing music, how do tracks normally start off for yourself?
Well, again, it's fun talking to you about this because your depth of understanding of music and creating music is so special. And so you kind of know the drill in that the moment music becomes too systematic, even in the creation of it, it can sort of start feeling like a sort of a factory, you know,
Yeah.
train of where you just sort of pump out the system, you know. And so we always try to break the thing up. We did an album years ago called Run Wild, Live Free, Love Strong. And Luke he'd written it about his kid at the time. He's just learned to walk. And it's like, he came up with a little riff like, hey, you run wild. And then we pulled in Andy Mineo, this New York hip hop artist, and we just sort of built this whole thing around it. And or it'll be a beat. Or, you know, most recently we did a song with Jordan Sparks called Love Me Like I Am. And I actually was sleeping and I woke up in the middle of the night with that phrase, love me like I am. And I took it into a writing session the next day. And Josh Kerr is one of our key writers with us, turned around and said, it's amazing that you can love me like I am. And I was like, oh, that's great. And then Michael Pollock, another writer in the room or on Zoom at that point, you know, kind of took it and ran with it. So I will say this, we are piners. We do pine over these tracks, you know, and really try and, I mean, we did a song called Joy a few years back, and I think we did 80 versions of it before it was finished. And speaking of London, we work very closely with a gentleman by the name of Aqualung, or Matt Hales, who's down in Bath and one of the dearest friends of mine. And I actually wrote a lot of that in Bath, England, ironically. So a little full
Nice.
circle moment for you.
Excellent. Joel, it's been a pleasure having a catch up with you.
You as well.